Hi, welcome to the first episode of Curse of Geek. I'm Lunar Phoenix, and I just got out of Castle Ravenloft. And this, to
Wait,
my immediate left, is my buddy Tamashi.
Ravenloft? Wait, do you mean Strad's place?
Oh, of course, what did you expect?
Wait, you were with Strad?
Well, of course.
I don't think she told me that before.
Well, I have to spend time with all the different D&D villains. I am a DM after all.
Why with the villains though?
Hey, it's part of the gig.
Oh yeah. Anyway, back to our point. We're gonna have to discuss Strad later. Actually, we're discussing him in a few. If you're here with us, that means you will be tuning into our current discussions that will be having multiple topics. And as my dear friend here, Lunar, mentioned, welcome to Curse of Geek, where we're all cursed to be freaking awesome.
And awesome indeed, I'd say.
Oh, definitely. So, would you like to actually be carrying us, hopefully, to our first topic, or do you want to tell the people here why we are even called Curse of Geek?
Of course. I'll start with how we even named our little podcast. Tamashi and I met playing Curse of Strahd, a D&D module set in the Ravenloft setting of D&D. It's a spooky, scary place.
And that's to actually say the least of it. We're not probably gonna drop many spoilers on you because I would recommend playing it with your DMs. For the ones that probably do not understand what a DM is, would you like to tell us, please, Luna?
Sure.
What's a DM?
A DM is shorthand for Dungeon Master, the person who runs the game for the players.
Yep, that kind of dungeon. Anyone that thought anything else, please get your brains out of the gutter for a second there. We're here to be geeks and awesome. Anyway. So, back to our topic. I believe the first topic we'll be actually tackling in this podcast right now will be actually horror in D&D. I hope
Or other
everyone is
tabletop
ready
role-playing.
for it.
Though, feel free to
Well,
introduce
yeah.
yourself, Tamashi. I can't forget my
Oh.
reliable and wonderful co-host.
Well, you can't blame me. You started with being with Strad. I mean, holy smokes. Anyway.
Hey, last week I was hanging out with Vecna.
Sweet lord. The next thing, I know you're gonna be with Shar.
I don't chill with Shar. She's a little too much of a handful. Same with Loth. She's a little much. If I'm going to hang out with other dark gods, it'll just be the ones that I know aren't going to be a pain in my neck.
Well, I don't blame you for love, because, well, who wants to hang out with a spider? The only spider I'm actually willing to hang out with is Spider-Man.
But we were getting you to introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, true, sorry. I am the scatterbrain cosplayer, basically all-around gamer and multiple things, Tamashi Saka. Pleasure to meet you all.
And so, with that out of the way, we will be delving into our first little topic. Since it is October, or affectionately referred to as Spooktober, we've decided to do
Spooktober!
a couple of different horror or spooky themed topics for the month. So first on the docket,
Oh, definitely,
is how we met, which is via D&D and horror in that setting, along with maybe a couple of other tabletop role-playing games that maybe some of you have heard of, and maybe you haven't heard of.
Also, just a quick note, D&D does not stand for Do Not Disturb, it's more of a Dungeons and Dragons. However, you can actually go with the Do Not Disturb, because when you are actually playing that game, you don't want people to disturb you.
At least on Discord, if you know what I mean. So, do you want to start us off then, Tamashi? talk about some of
Oh,
your own horrific experiences in D&D, since you're fairly new.
oh, yeah, I am, and I've been quiet because, well, let's just say memories just flashed in front of my eyes, just like my soul was about to be leaving it, with all the kind of scary things I've been through in Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, you have been through quite a bit.
Well, yeah, if you would consider my current character basically getting awfully close to dying multiple times since the beginning of the campaign, yeah, you would know that I've been through hell.
Yeah, how
Especially
many
with the fact
times has
that
Trevor
I
nearly
actually died
died?
once. I mean, I have nearly died so many times to the point that Trevor became a blood measuring unit.
Ah, yes, the unit of how many Trevors
Mm-hmm.
lost. That's the fun of that game.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is one of those games that even in failure, you are still having fun.
Oh, totally.
So, if we are going to be start sharing stories about the spooky moments of Dungeons and Dragons, I believe I only have probably one story, and you probably have a number of stories. If I remember, you had one of your players as well go through different situations.
Oh yeah, I can tell stories from a couple of different angles, but you first.
Okay, so let's start with how spooky it can get. Because in some situations, you can never tell if things are going wrong or if things are going right. For examples, in the very first campaign I've ever played, it was something of a otherworlders jumping into the worlds of um, Dungeons and Dragons, basically. People from different dimensions meeting up in Instrad, I believe it's called. However, our party was made out of an orc paladin, a female lionin huntress, and a ranger. I apologize, her subclass was hunter. A human sorcerer, a human monk who's yours truly, and a fairy that could change sizes. She can be a very tiny one like Tinkerbell, or she can actually be almost like a human child size at I guess max size for her. However, in one of our journeys, we have actually reached a town where it seemed like everything is going wrong in this town. No one can remember anybody. No one can recall anything of what's going around them. Something could happen like just a few minutes ago, and they will have absolutely no memory of it. You would have certain parts of the town have buildings in them that looked like they were abandoned recently, but the people wouldn't even remember anyone being there in the first place. However, we didn't suspect very much. We just thought, well, another rundown town of sorts, until we found something in our room. We basically had a room in a tavern slash inn, in a way. Um, we found a blank on the wall that's covering possibly a hole. Moving it out of the way, our orc paladin and lionin could not fit into that hole. And we couldn't really trust throwing in the poor human sorcerer. He doesn't have anything going his way in, situations where he could be attacked. So I volunteered to be going in. I tied a rope around my waist and handed it to them, and the fairy decided to hide in my pocket, just, tag along for a bit. Going down the hall, it got darker and darker until I reached something of a cliff. Um, and then going down, I tried to reach around, I tried to see things around me, I couldn't see anything. I kept my hands on the walls. The walls seemed to be, um, I guess, like water is running through them or something. And as I walked, I could feel the textures of the wall turning from wet stone to something of a scaly flesh thingy. And just then, the dungeon master decided to cut it off, aka the point of view, and switch to the point of view to the people that are in the room holding the rope. What they could feel is the rope being tugged at. Something is pulling against the rope. They, thankfully, rolled high enough to actually pull me out. And according to the dungeon master, if I wasn't pulled out, I would have been dead.
Oh, goodness.
Heck yeah. That was a scary situation. However, it doesn't stop there. My character recalls nothing of what was going on. He recalls nothing of what occurred down there. He was just hurt badly, and the fairy in his pocket was turned into a crystal, where we actually had to take her to the summer court if we were able to.
Yeah,
However,
fascinating.
eventually we found out what was going on. It turns out that the town was being used as a base, I guess, of sorts, or a house. Well, let's just say a false Hydra took this town as its own home.
Goodness.
And talking about one that knows villains and knows these creatures and is a dungeon master, Lunar, if you could just maybe explain to people what a false Hydra is?
Well, a false Hydra is a monster that inhabits a town, imitating people around you and oftentimes feeding off of memories or other things from the people who are hapless enough to wander in. They use an ability called Song to lull their victims into forgetting that they even met one. I've actually made a monster using aspects of a false Hydra before. My players have not yet encountered the thing, but I do fear for them when they do. Or if they do.
I mean, false Hydras have a really scary ability, which is if they actually devour a victim, that victim's existence is almost erased in a way.
Oh, yeah, that is one of the more scary aspects of a false Hydra.
So, Lunar, this was actually my story. If you don't mind me, if you don't mind telling us, what was the situation with your player?
Oh, my player from my own Curse of Strahd game that I run on Friday afternoons. They play a fallen Azamar divine soul sorcerer. Recently, they were once a protector, but due to certain things that happened in game, they became fallen, and now they're going through that transition. And as they are going through the transition, they bleed ink. The idea for the ink bleed during the transition from protector to fallen has come from them, and it was inspired by a game known as Corpse Party.
Wait, you're telling me that they're almost like a fallen angel that bleeds ink in a way?
way, um, Azamar are half celestials, so they're not fully an angel per se, but one of their parents could have been, or something of the like. But we can get into that at a future date when we get into perhaps more D&D related topics.
Well, that's definitely something. So, any situations that happened to you though as a player? I mean, I do believe that you've played games as a player, not just run games as a dungeon master.
Oh, of course. Uh, One of my favorites was actually from a game that I played under one of my friends. His name's Devin. And if you're watching this, Devin, hi! I hope you don't mind. So, with my friends with Devin, he was running a game that was more of an episodic type D&D campaign. We ended at 15th level, but I will never forget an encounter that we had sneaking around in the sewer system of a capital city, trying to sneak into the palace to get something important that we had to get in order to fight back against a vampire lord who had taken over the country. And while we were down in the sewers, because our group was a former thieves guild and we were the only survivors, we had to kind of keep quiet and try not to attract attention, but the entire night the shadows were playing tricks on us or messing with us, and at one point it was the voice of the vampire lord that we heard taunting us. We all were either scared or angry, and it nearly drove our party up a wall. But we were able to survive and keep our heads down enough that the patrols wouldn't find us. But I'll never forget just how we all freaked out hearing that voice in the sewer after we were like unsure if we were just being played tricks on from the shadows that surrounded our little campfire underneath.
Well, that's definitely gonna make me stay as far away from sewers and campfires. Well, not campfires, but campsites for a while. I mean, holy smokes. So, going from that, you have any other situations that happened to you as well? Or was it that one only?
No, I have quite a few stories, but I didn't want to take up too much time.
Well, that's actually understandable. So, next on our schedule.
Well, before we transition out to the video game section, there's a few things that I kind of wanted to go over. Which is there
definitely.
are horror settings in D&D that are quite fun and fascinating to talk about or study on. Of course, you have the classic Ravenloft setting, which was popularized back in AD&D or 2nd edition, for those of you who are new. Whereas Ravenloft as a setting doesn't just refer to Castle Ravenloft, Strahd von Zarovic's titular home. It's actually a full setting with the Domains of Dread, sub-pockets of a pocket dimension that each contain a different type of horror.
So you're telling me there's more than one, like domain and dimension of actually scary, spooky stuff?
Oh yeah. Let's see. There's Lamordia, which is very much a Frankenstein body horror type setting. You have Blutsburg, which is more cosmic horror with vampiric mind flayers. That's a fun one. There's Tepesh, which is more kind of like your fairy tale horror folklore type beat because it's run by a rather nasty hag by the name of the Mother, and her story is quite fascinating.
Yeah, the only hag that I would say I kind of accepted for a bit was Auntie Ethel from Baldur's Gate 3, but with my current situations with hags in the current Curse of Strahd game with Trevor, nope, I'm not the hag's biggest fan.
You've gotten cursed by at least one.
Yeah, and I've seen 3 naked grandmas!
Naked, huh?
Well, basically 3 naked hags, which is like scary as hell.
Oh, that was a good one.
Trust me, if normal hags do not scare you, 3 naked hags would definitely scare the bejesus out of you. Especially
traumatize you for
while
life.
they're worshipping. Oh, definitely, especially while worshipping a vampire lord of sorts, I guess.
Well, that is what Strahd is.
Also, the only hag that I'm allowing to talk to me is the one that would call me Petal. I mean, she was kind of iconic-ish in the Baldur's Gate game.
Oh, she's definitely an iconic hag. And that's something we can get into on our next episode, which is Monsters of Horror.
Oh, definitely, because some hags kind of remind me of a specific folklore that we would actually hopefully talk about.
Yes, good
It's
old
a lady
Baba
with
Yaga.
a hut. Yes, the lady with the hut that has chicken legs.
Yes, Baba
And no
Yaga.
Yep, and no KFC, and that's the reason why there's no KFC in Russia.
I didn't know that. That's kind of funny.
No, I'm actually joking. I'm not sure if they have KFC there or not, but I'm not sure if KFC wants to get those chicken legs though. Oh yeah. Now, video games?
Yep.
What do you say?
Horror in video games. Let's do this.
course, we're gonna first hit you with the classics, with the Resident Evil series, the
Ah,
Silent
yes.
Hill series, and Alan Wake. I
Alan
gotta
Wake
say, Alan Wake
is a
is
good
one of
one.
yeah, and I have to admit, Alan Wake is one of those games that um I couldn't finish. I couldn't even reach halfway. Like the way they played with the psychological horror in it and the things that they actually addressed, it caused me a certain level of anxiety. I couldn't finish the game. I have to
Why is
admit,
that?
I kind of stopped eventually. Something about the ways that they played it, the settings, the well, not the puzzles, but how the enemies would appear, how the character would react, the mental state of the character, and so on. It just had an impact on me, in a way.
Well, that's entirely understandable with a psychological horror game like Alan Wake.
And we're gonna also talk about psychological horror games. I would believe Silent Hill as well
Ah,
kind of
yes, the
counts as
granddaddy.
psychological horror. Yeah. Actually, going from D&D to Silent Hill, I believe you said that they may have some similarities of sorts one time.
Yes, when we were discussing before, I had uh, I had touched on the fact that there are a lot of similarities between Silent Hill and at least Barovia or the Domains of Dread at large. Not just the aesthetics, but when you know more about this story of the domains, of Strahd himself, and how and why the domains came to be, you have to wonder if the Team Silent that developed the game decided to borrow some inspiration for that setting. Because, to put it easily enough, everybody knows that Silent Hill, it's about taking the main character, or in the first game, Alessa Gillespie, their fears, their traumas, and putting it out there in a more symbolic way, either to torment them or to have them realize that what is going on is not good and try to break the cycle. It's not always, well, good for the character to keep perpetuating the cycle, but sometimes they can. It really comes down to how you play the game, and that's why the remake of Silent Hill 2, yeah, I guess actually turned out quite well, from what I hear. I was initially skeptical when I heard the announcement that it was going to be remade, especially by Bloober Team of all developers, because they don't necessarily have the best track record, or didn't at the time have the best track record of handling such delicate subject matter with the right amount of respect. So I was worried that the game would fall on its face, but from the reviews I've seen, from sources that I particularly trust for reviews that I don't believe are video game shills, I find that they managed to pull off the impossible and actually make the Silent Hill 2 remake viable.
Oh, that's actually good. Talking actually about remakes, I believe also Resident Evil had a few remakes a while ago with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3.
Actually, it's quite
And
a
I would
lot
say,
longer of a list.
yeah. But when it comes to actually Resident Evil 3, here's the thing that happened. The classic was more of a standalone for quite a while. Like when it came to the story, it was not as connected as it should have been to Resident Evil 2, because according to the story, Resident Evil 3 actually starts a few hours before Resident Evil 2.
Ah, yes, technically both happen simultaneously to each other.
Yeah, but in Resident Evil 2, basically Claire and Leon reach the city a few hours after the outbreak has begun. However, in Resident Evil 3, you are basically somewhere around the beginning of the outbreak in Raccoon City.
Yep.
In the and in the remakes of Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3, there were a lot of moments where you would meet almost the same characters. However, it would be a few hours or a few minutes after or before the others. Yeah, and for a guy that has watched almost over 13 hours of Resident Evil, series lore, plus all the biological explanations of the viruses and the parasites and the, you know, whatnots of it, I can actually tell you even which BOWs belong to which company. Because I
Nice.
think it was, yeah, I think it was like a total of 2 or 3 companies that created BOWs.
Yeah, it wasn't just Umbrella. Umbrella was the start of
Mhm.
it, but then others wanted to get in on it.
It was Umbrella followed by Tricell. Those were like the main two. There was Neo Umbrella. I guess that was kind of somewhere under Wesker for a while, I think.
Yeah, Neo
And
Umbrella was
then
partially under Wesker because he was trying to restart Umbrella under his control.
Tricell bought like the research basically from Umbrella after Umbrella's fall, where they made their own adjustments to the BOWs. Then there was one group that was, I think, in the story between Resident Evil 3 and 4, or was it between 4 and 5, that actually began their own research that then leads to Resident Evil 7. Basically, it was a specific organization that wanted to make their own BOWs of sorts and kind of worked with a mold. Basically, that was the premise of Resident Evil 7. However, I really do not want to acknowledge Resident Evil 8 because Resident Evil 8 is where basically Resident Evil turned from sci-fi to supernatural.
Well, yes and no, but I can understand why some people don't necessarily like it. I still have fun with Lady Dimitrescu because running around a castle is kind of fun, especially since she's a vampire lady. I get why the internet fell so hard for her because she's a pretty vampire lady who wants to step on you.
Also, you have a thing for vampires, as it seems, whether they were in video games or Dungeons and Dragons.
Hey, I can't say that I don't.
Well,
You outed
you,
me.
you heard it here, everybody. Anyway,
Not like it was a big
um,
secret to begin with.
exactly, it wasn't exactly that big of a secret. However, a small, I guess we're gonna call it a bit of a
I
secret,
mean,
is
a witch hanging out with vampires. It's not that hard to get together, you know?
well, there is a small bit of a secret. Hopefully, our like no one hears about this. You don't want Trevor to be around because you want the half vampire to be there.
Hey, shush. I still love Trevor. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, I'm just messing with you.
I'm a sucker
So,
for tragic stories.
understandable. I mean, who doesn't love a little bit of drama with horror on the side?
Oh, totally.
And talking about a bit of a drama which kind of occurred, I guess, I believe a bit of drama that happened with the Silent Hill games actually prevented us from receiving a very nice game called PT.
Oh, yeah, because of Konami being stupid. But that's how Bloober Team got their start, which is kind of almost cyclical in a way, since now they actually did the remake. Because they started
Oh
off
wait,
doing Layers of Fear, which was very much inspired by TT.
so wait, did they make an official PT or was it just a demo that was then removed afterwards?
PT was a demo, it was shorthand for playable teaser.
Okay.
It
However,
was.
for a playable teaser, I mean, that was very well made.
Oh, yeah. It shows some of the talent that Konami has on hand, which oftentimes they do mistreat, so I can't say that I disagree with some of the community's sentiment about screw Konami. Sorry, we're gonna have to kind of try to keep this a little bit clean in here, guys.
Yes, please. Let's keep it that way. We are just starting. We don't want any issues with big companies yet. But we're coming for you. Just kidding. When it comes to scary, spooky games, what was the game that scared you the most?
I would actually say Dead Space, and I've been a fan of the Dead Space universe for quite some time. It's very much more a sci-fi cosmic horror. But, you know, even if you've watched a million playthroughs, when you play it yourself and you decidedly go into a room that you know you're gonna get jumped. It doesn't make it any less scary when you do get jumped. It is what it is, and
I mean, anticipation sometimes can really be a big factor of things.
oh no, definitely.
So for me, I would go with I believe Summer of '58,
That's one I've not
which
heard of
is,
before.
well, it's more, I guess, I'm gonna call it more of an investigation kind of spooky game where you are something of a journalist or someone that is looking into a story regarding a haunted location or a bunch of haunted locations. One of them is a school, followed, I believe, by a hospital. However, with how that game scared me, I have to admit, I'm not sure if there are any more locations because I stopped at the beginning of the hospital. I just couldn't take it anymore. And let me tell you this, sometimes the scariest thing in these games is not even the supernatural things. Sometimes it can come from something as simple as a cat.
A cat? An actual
Yep,
cat?
I mean, yeah, a cat in the game. If someone would actually go and look into my social media, I believe I do have the clip somewhere around there. A cat scared the bejesus out of me. Basically, the game kind of lured me to look into a ball, basically, that was rolling on the floor. The moment I got close, I heard a very loud crash behind me, coming from the room behind me. I was just scared senseless just to later on hear a very, very, very annoying to me at least, because it was the reason it scared me, a very sorry sounding meow. So, badoom dish 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 dish. Meow. I'm like, what the? Exactly.
Oh dear.
Exactly.
Oh dear, oh
I'm
dear.
like, yeah, this game is making me officially hate cats. Like, if there is a game that will actually make you not want cats around you during spooky situations, it's definitely this game. But aside from that, the game is definitely good. There are a lot of games, especially actually a lot of games that tend to lure you into jump scares or scary situations. A game that is action horror. Of course, if you play it now, it's not that scary. However, during that time, I do know that I played it for 2-3 hours, and let me tell you this: after these 2 or 3 hours, I realized that the whole time I was frozen stiff in my place. Trying to move after I stopped the game felt so hard because it felt like I was breaking ice off my body. And that game was Fear. And by fear, I don't mean the full word, I mean F.E.A.R.
You mean the shooter game with the ghost girl?
Yep, the shooter game with a ghost girl. Because trust me, nothing is scarier in a game than a spooky child. I mean, have you seen The Shining with the twins?
Yeah, but the
Sheesh.
twins actually don't do anything during the movie. But we'll get to the movie section sooner or later. We're almost there.
Well,
Not
very
yet.
much understandable.
If you
So,
want to talk
when it
about
comes to
movie
spooky
tie-in
kids,
movies, there's always Alien
hmm
Isolation.
oh yeah, that's definitely true. That game is something.
Oh, it's definitely something. I would not play that with the lights off.
Oh, okay. You know what? With that, I'm gonna. You know what? Between you guys and me, I'm gonna try and convince her to do that, and we will see the result. We're gonna try and have her actually
Good luck.
stream playing
Good
that
luck.
game with the lights off. We'll see if that will happen.
No, no, no! Don't tease them with a good time, okay?
Hey, a good time is what they tuned in for, and that's exactly what hopefully they will be getting. However, let's see if we can roll high on persuasion next time with her.
Yeah, because you just straight net one.
Yeah, I was rolling with disadvantage, I'll have to say that.
Hey,
So,
it is what it is.
so the question here is, well, now we know that there are a bunch of scary games and also games that tend to have you not play the hero. I believe those games are actually rather fun and with my mask, I can tell you one of those games, which is Friday the 13th, following the horror movie.
Ah, yes. There's also Dead by Daylight and a few other games as well that kind of follow in that vein.
Yeah, I believe Dead by Daylight kind of set a nice way of playing a horror game of sorts, where a player would choose to be a killer, one of multiple killers, and also you would have a bunch of survivors that will need to finish a certain objective to actually escape the killers. Now, let me tell you this: Dead by Daylight and Silent Hill, sorry, are two of the main games I will never want to be ending up in, because those two games are the ones where death is not the end. And if you are going to look into the lore of these two, I would recommend doing so. They are very much amazing with their lures. Some games like these two tend to have their stories in the game itself, and some are having them a bit hidden. You would have to do some more research. However, thankfully, there is a bunch of amazing people on YouTube and so on that tend to do that research and present to us in very amazing ways.
I would also
So I would
recommend the
recommend.
Dead Space lore as well. It's quite fascinating when you get into like the cosmic horror angle of it. That's if you're into that
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
Dead
thing.
Space actually had a nice lore. I believe I did look into that once. It's really amazing, I have to admit.
Like how the marker works and the brethren moons and how it all kind of interconnects.
Yeah, that actually left an impact on me anyway because, well, when I did look up that lore, I believe it was around the time on social media they uncovered some relics that kind of look like it. I'm like, uh-oh, here we go.
Oh no, no, we're gonna run into the brethren moons. Oh no, oh dear.
Yeah, I just wish people would actually learn from movies and games on ways of survival because, it would have inspired a lot of people to stay alive. But, well, that's life.
Yeah, such is life.
So, games that surprisingly tend to be not scary, however, tends to scare other people. Do you have any?
Well, I know of moments in non horror games where people have gotten scared before, myself included.
Do you have any experience in it?
Yeah,
Okay, so
for
if
one,
you could share one, I guess.
Destiny 2. There's quite a lot of moments from previous not modules. I'm thinking D&D again. From previous seasons and previous DLC that are quite horrific, especially when it comes to the Hive. Destiny as a universe and as a whole is more sci-fi in its presentation, more kind of high-flung, having fun, looter shooter. But there are moments, especially during the Witch Queen DLC and a few others that came before it, that were like, oh my goodness, this is horrific to watch or to even learn about. One thing I can think of is the Dead Man's Hand, or was it? I forgot the name of the shotgun, but you have to go into a Cabal ship that a bunch of Guardians went missing on to uncover what happened, and you find that the place has been twisted and warped by darkness, and by the end of it, you find that the Guardian who you were following is strung up, dangling from this fungal-ish darkness growth that's how you get the gun. But the story of this ship getting lost in the void and what happens as a result of what went on there is quite scary in and of itself. It has a lot of alien-esque moments that really put you on edge as you're running through the mission.
I mean, absolutely true. Games like Destiny as well have some scary moments, and I do agree. The Hive tend to have the scariest moments of all the races, I believe, in Destiny. However, if I am going to be mentioning also a game that is kind of scary in its own way, surprisingly, it would be Minecraft.
I don't know why Minecraft.
Well, Minecraft, probably a lot of people don't see it the way I kind of did when I first played it. Your character has no relation to any of the creatures or even the people that exist in that world that you are basically thrown into. If you think about it, you are thrown into a world that you have nothing, no knowledge about, no nothing of it. There might be some lore behind Minecraft to a point, but the only lore I could find myself, I mean, if anyone else could illuminate me probably behind the actual lore of Minecraft. The only lures I could find was basically after, in regards to certain creatures in that world, like the Endermen and so on. But me playing it, I felt like I was in like lost in a bit of a different world, almost similar to Limbo or something, where you could find enemies and the people that exist in that place are people that have almost no resemblance of you. People that resemble humans have no resemblance to you. You are way different to them. You could be the outsider in many ways than one. And it kind of gave me this feeling where it's like basically loss and anxiety when playing that game.
Well, I can see why you would feel that way.
I mean, yeah, that's basically what it kind of did to me. And if we're gonna talk about Minecraft, I believe they are actually having a live action movie coming out soon with Jack Black.
That's fascinating. I didn't think that they were going to go for a live action movie with Minecraft. I would have thought they would have done animation because it would have been a little bit easier.
I mean, to be quite honest, a lot of people are not happy with that fact, but that's a topic for, well, that's a discussion for our next topic. If you have any more games you would like to mention for us?
Well, I would actually like to bring up the one that I mentioned when I was talking about one of my players, the game Corpse Party. It's part of a pixel horror type beat on the internet. Now, the story of Corpse Party is very long, and I've watched way too many hours just getting the story of the game itself down. Technically, the original Corpse Party game came out in the early to late 90s as part of a software competition, but they were using JRPG Maker. So think about like all of the classic JRPG games like old school Final Fantasy where it was pixels instead of 3D rendered models. But someone
Oh
decided
yeah.
to take out all of the JRPG and make it a horror game instead. So it started a trend because Corpse Party was the oldest and most well loved of this particular genre. It's been remade several times. So the one that most everybody who's ever played Corpse Party is familiar with is a game known as Corpse Party Blood Covered Repeated Fear, but they never actually market that in the West as the full title. It's just Corpse Party. Now, Corpse Party itself actually gets some of its inspiration from games like Sweet Home, which ironically was how you get Resident Evil. It was one of the first
I
really
don't think I've heard of
interesting.
Sweet Home.
Now, Sweet Home
The only thing
itself,
that I heard about was with that name is a Netflix series that came a while ago. I think it was like Korean or Japanese. I don't recall.
I believe that
I
one is
think it was
Korean.
based on webcam. Sorry, it was based on a webcomic, not webcam. God, my brain. Anyway,
Now, Sweet Home, the video game, is much older. It was based off of a kind of a B movie horror in Japan, and it only ever came out on the Famicom. But the whole point of the game was party management, and if you lost one of your party members, they were gone for good. So with Corpse Party, it's much the same. You are in an unfamiliar situation being haunted by spooks and specters and all sorts of other nasties running around in a haunted school instead of a haunted house like in Sweet Home. And to survive, you have to make sure you can get all of the players, all the characters to the end. And it's very gory. It can be very surprising at times. And the horror is so masterfully done with some of the descriptions and the sound effects. But the pixelized nature of it, where it's all sprites on a screen rather than 3D rendered models, sometimes is why people will forget that they're playing a horror game instead of, you know, a like game like Mario or something like that until it's too late. And it's a great story. I kind of don't engage with the second and third games in the series, though there is a couple of anthologies that were added as well, because they're just not nearly as good at telling the story of Heavenly Host and the events around it that the first and the remake, technically the remake, Repeated Fear, was able to pull off. You've got famous YouTubers who've actually played these particular games before in their early years, like PewDiePie or Markiplier. You actually can go back in their playlist and find them playing this back in the day.
Well, I definitely would check that out, because who doesn't love a scared streamer?
Oh yeah.
I gotta say, yeah, I gotta say, when it came to horror games, I kind of like watching Markiplier play them because his reactions are just hilarious.
Oh yeah,
And
Mark
one of the
has some of the best.
Mhm.
It's why
Also,
I like watching him play FNAF, even though I'm not a big fan of the FNAF series. So many of his reactions during FNAF have just been so funny to watch. Especially when he starts
yeah,
singing out of
I would have to
nowhere.
agree. I would have to agree with that one, to be quite honest. I used to play to actually watch him as well play FNAF, and let me tell you this. One time I was actually at work while watching him play FNAF, and let me tell you this. I was so focused with him to the point that I actually dropped my phone during one of the jump scares.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, definitely. I mean, FNAF in its beginnings, um, definitely had a way with jump scares. However, in the latest series, I'm not sure much when it comes to it.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of FNAF as current, but I liked the first three. I wasn't super okay with the fourth, but I kind of accept it for what it is now.
I mean, fully understandable. Of course, some people would like to kind of milk a franchise until it's fully done, even if the story is actually done officially in a way.
Well, and Scott Cawthon isn't the one in charge anymore. I will say I liked the
Uh,
movie.
I'm not quite sure who that stuff coffin is, to be quite honest.
Scott Cawthon is the
I
creator.
yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Once you remove the creator out of their creations, that's basically where companies start getting greedy,
Pretty much.
and that kind of sucks, to be quite honest. The movie, I wasn't a big fan of the movie because I felt like it slightly messed around with the stories a bit too much, or the personalities of different characters. But I have to say, the actor they got in definitely saved the day. I like, at least in my opinion.
Which one?
And well, if you don't know him, I'm gonna tell you where he appeared. So, this amazing actor played an iconic character in Scooby-Doo,
Oh, you're
the
talking
live
about
action.
the guy who played Shaggy. I'm blanking on his
Mm,
name right now, but I know who you're talking about. He did make a very good William Afton, I'll say.
yeah, he like when you see the range of his acting between Scooby-Doo and between the time he played as Afton, it's amazing. And
Well, that
the
wasn't his first movie, actually. Oh, and that
yeah,
brings us to our next topic, actually, which is horror
hmm
films.
yep. And also the actor's name is Matthew
Matthew Lillard.
Lillard. Lillard, I believe the pronunciation. I apologize, sir, if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly.
It's alright.
if
But,
if you are going to be correcting me about your name, trust me, I would be honored to receive any kind of message from you.
but Matthew Lillard actually got his start in another horror film.
Oh, please do share.
That would be Scream.
Wait,
The
really?
original
He
Scream.
was in a Scream movie?
Yeah, he was in the original Scream. He was one of the. Oh,
Oh,
is this
snap.
going to be spoilers for a 30-year-old film? If you are going to have issues with a spoiler for a 30-year-old film, please jump ahead. If you have issues with spoilers for 30-year-old films. In the movie,
I mean, there will be some spoilers for different movies and different things during our discussion. We will be giving you some warnings, so you could try and skip ahead.
well, anyway, to talk spoilers a bit, Matthew Lillard played one of the two killers in Scream, the original. So that was one of the first things ever done with a horror, or at least in this case, a slasher movie. Matthew Lillard played one of the two villains of the piece. The two teenagers who would disguise themselves in a dollar store ghost face mask and run around killing people. And Matthew Lillard's character's excuse at the end of the movie was that he was peer pressured into doing it by his best friend. Meanwhile, his best friend wanted to get revenge for what happened to his dad.
Well, looking here, actually, I can see he was in multiple Scream movies. It seems he was in Scream 3, Scream 6, and Scream 4 as well.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that he'd been in those films past the first.
Also, a quick spoiler here, or not exactly a spoiler, it's more of a teaser, I believe. It seems he is, he might be featured in Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to be bringing William Afton back as Springtrap. We might as well be ready for it.
But I will have to say this is kind of amazing because looking at the kind of movies that are connected to him, I would say a great chunk of them would be Scooby-Doo. I believe he has I think almost played every Shaggy in every Scooby-Doo movie, even the Legos version.
Well, to be honest about Matthew Lillard, he is one of the best replacements for the original actor for Shaggy, which that would be Casey Kasem, whom, if you've ever watched Ghostbusters, did a bit part during the main scene where the Ghostbusters are running around New York catching ghosts during the theme song. Casey was the original for Shaggy, and after he passed, Matthew Lillard, after they came out with the movie, was so good at his portrayal of Shaggy, they kept him on even as the VA for Shaggy.
Yeah, it seems that Casey Kasem has done a lot of our childhood voices, I guess.
Oh yeah, he was a radio
From the
host.
Transformers to the Scooby to Captain Caveman to a lot of them, which is honestly outstanding. Even Doug Wonder, Dynamite.
Well, I wouldn't
Also,
be
I think
surprised.
with him, it was the first time Scooby ever met Batman.
Oh yeah, I remember those. I've seen some of the old stuff. But to get back on topic before we completely dive off into cartoons, which we could probably save for another episode. Horror movies and horror films. Now you have your classic slashers, you have your classic monster movies, and then you have the more cerebral horror.
If you could explain to me what's a cerebral horror, I can't even talk.
Run that back for me. Run that back for me.
Cerebral horror. What is it again?
So cerebral horror is horror that makes you think. Kind of like think psychological horror in that kind of same vein. It's horror that has you thinking hard long past the time that you've watched the film.
Oh, okay. So basically, Nightmare at Elm Street, you'll be basically, you'd have insomnia, not go to sleep, fearing a killer possibly appearing in your dreams somehow, or going near any kind of, you know, summer camps, fearing that a guy with a hockey mask would actually step out of the lake and, you know,
Not
basically
quite.
murder everybody.
Not quite. Cerebral horror is more that kind of horror that um, you're trying to unpiece the puzzle the whole time. It's a thinking man sort of deal. So think films like I want to say The Thing by John Carpenter. That's more cerebral. Hereditary, another A24 film. A24 is really good at making more cerebral horror, where you're thinking about what happened and how things went from point A to point B without it. It's not that the scares aren't there, but the scares come from when you put the dots together of what's really going on.
And quick spoilers: most of these games are not games, movies. Brain. Yeah, brain. My brain is braining lately. As I introduced myself earlier, the scatterbrain. Hello.
Well, we both have ADHD. Let's be
Mm-hmm.
fair here.
So when it comes to the movies, when it comes to how things went wrong, a majority of them have it, basically leading all the way to human error or human arrogance of sorts. Uh, as some people say, humanity is its own doom. And a lot of these movies kind of show us that in movies like Terminator.
Well, Terminator's more of an action film, but you can say it's a little bit more horrific.
I mean, when it comes to basically the story of it, or how, like certain perspectives, you'd kind of think about it, how like something as simple as an AI could lead to the end of the world of sorts, or something. And also you can actually see, this is kind of surprising as well. Matrix was kind of scary to me. Like the idea of it was kind of scary because unlike in Terminator, they didn't kill the people. They were basically using the people, and that's kind of scary in its own way.
Sure.
Like humanity was something of a battery or something that they could use. So we basically became the slaves to the machine that everybody is telling us we'll be.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon in real life. Let's hope.
Well, we have ChatGPT controlling people right now, but well, we can go from there. The only fear is, please, people, at least if you're gonna use AI, introduce that AI to the three rules of robotics. For the love of God. Anyway, away from sci-fi, back to horror. A nice horror movie, I would say, aside from the amazing animation movies of Resident Evil, that are actually rather very beautiful. I would say 30 Days of Night.
Oh, that is a good one. It's actually based on a comic.
It's a really good movie for people that actually like vampire things. Um, 30 Days of Night, I believe. I think it was in the Arctic of sorts or
It takes
something.
place in Alaska.
Yeah, in Alaska, where basically they have, I guess, one time a year. The nighttime lasts for a month, which is approximately 30 days, unless you want to count that, make them 31 or 28. I'm not quite sure with that calculation, but 30 days of night. So imagine no sun for 30 days. That's a vampire's basically dream.
Yeah, and they rip apart a small town in Anchorage.
Poor town. Not much of spoilers on that one. I would recommend that you go and watch it. One of the classic, also horror movies, I would say, is The Fly.
Now, which one? Are we talking the David Cronenberg version, or are we talking the original Vincent Price version? I mean, both can be
Well,
considered horrific.
you sure know your versions.
Oh, I
No,
pull
I
out a
would go
movie
with
nut
the
job.
1986 one.
Ah, yes, the classic 1980, and David Cronenberg and his body horror. Man, that one, that one will hit hard because a lot of the parallels in that movie, and this is what I mean by more cerebral horror, where like the message is hidden and you have to kind of unravel it. A lot of what takes place in that film kind of hits hard with those who either have suffered through cancer or AIDS and watching their bodies change and fall apart. It's quite the hard watch for those who've been through something like that. But it's a beautiful metaphor for what happens. Still,
And Jeff
very horrific.
Goldblum did a good job too.
Yeah, he
I
wasn't
mean,
going
with
the whole time.
well, with him, life definitely found a way in that movie.
You know, you could say to a certain extent that Jurassic Park is also horrific too.
I mean, when it comes to Jurassic Park 1, unlike especially if I'm going to compare it to the ones that followed, I would say Jurassic Park 1 was more like horror, I guess, or scarier than the ones that followed afterwards. The original Jurassic Park definitely had me scared like crazy from T-Rex and the raptors. Mainly the raptors, I'm going to have to admit. The raptors scare me the most.
I mean, the raptors are meant to be horrific.
Well, the portrayal of the raptors was actually, they're going with horrific. They definitely scare me. They make me think more than once on how to actually survive their encounters. I'm by no means a small-sized individual, so when it comes to wanting to escape these creatures, they got the brains too. I mean, they got the brains, they got the brawn, and they got the speed. They're a perfect killer of sorts.
I mean, they were for the prehistoric ages. But
Yeah, and
back to
now I
more
heard that there's a
specific horror
new,
films.
but yeah, there's actually a new one coming out soon, by the way, for Jurassic World, I believe.
I've heard.
However, yeah. However, as she mentioned, back to our horror movies, um, the 13th Ghost remake.
Ah, yeah.
The 13th Ghost remake. That one scared the bejesus out of me. I'm trying to watch my words here. So I'm sorry for using bejesus, but yeah, it scared the bejesus out of me, especially with the readings of the book that were in the movie, because, believe it or not, I'm a very superstitious person. Superstitious. When it comes to that book, the reason it scared me is because in the folklore of where I currently reside, which is secret. Anyway, there
Look,
are
I live in my own pocket dimension. That's why we're here.
exactly. There are books that basically have something similar to what's going on. Also, that some people mentioned that the book that was written, read, sorry, and used in the movie is one of those books. And those books are, I'm not sure exactly how many copies there are, but believe it or not, I think, what's the biggest library in the U.S.?
I think that'd be the Library of Congress, but I could be wrong.
Well, in that library, they actually have a copy of it. Believe it or not, one of those books. They actually have a copy of one of those books. And that book, in I'm going to paraphrase it here and translate it, is supposedly called the Book of the Deer. And the reason why it's called that, and by deer I mean the animal, and the reason it's called that is because it's written on the skin of a deer with the blood of a human and the language of demons. And with that, with how the movie played it, it fits. It
Entirely fair.
fits, and that definitely played a very nice role in scaring me while watching the movie. Also, the actors did a really good job, to be quite honest.
I mean, I haven't watched it myself, but I've heard for some it's a fun one. Now, if you're talking about movies, horror movies that center around a book, you might want to go with a relative classic when it comes to that, which would be The Evil Dead. Now, that is a movie where you do not want to mess around with an evil book at all. Because the minute you start reading out of that, you're going to have to deal with Deadites, and they are quite a handful, to say the least. Unlike your classic zombies that groan and moan, they will come and torment you using the face of your loved ones in order to break you down and screw with you. And poor Ash Williams has so much to deal with.
Well, he definitely has a lot to deal with, but he can always put his trust in his chainsaw.
Oh yeah, trusty old chainsaw. That's a good one.
Mhm. I mean, with that, he can definitely get out of this. However, when it comes to things that are cursed that you possibly will not be able to get out of them, be careful when someone gives you a puzzle, because that
Oh,
puzzle might have something behind it.
you referencing
Not every
Hellraiser?
puzzle, exactly. Not every puzzle is to be solved. Sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Hellraiser is a personal favorite. I love it for some
Oh
of
yeah.
the story elements, and at least with the original, though the 2020, 2021 or was it 2023 movie was actually really fun to watch because it brought it back to the simplistic nature of the story. Well, I wouldn't really call it simplistic, but it refocused on how the Cenobites as a whole act. They aren't really villainous per se. They are more, well, outside observers. They're a third party. It's the people involved that are the ones that do the horrific actions, like the sacrifice to the Leviathan in the new movie. Whereas, like in the old one, you had to specifically seek them out. They would not come and find you. They weren't slasher movie villains that would chase you down. You had to willingly seek them out.
Well, that definitely gives us a bit of more fear, I guess, you and I, especially when it comes to one of our D&D party members, because they have a puzzle that's kind of is something like that. We're just fearing if they solve that puzzle, something bad might happen.
I mean, it
So
is
wish
Curse of
us luck.
Strahd, but you never know.
Yeah, and with that puzzle, it might be the Curse of Mifaz. With that final dodgeball that they tossed on us last time, I'm not sure how am I even standing. Back to back to movies, and when we come to movies, we actually have to also address certain things. Movies that were turned into shows. So you got one of the amazing movies that I would actually recommend is The Mist. Later on turned into a show called with the same name of The Mist. I still believe the movie was better than the show.
Oh, it sounds like it. I mean, sometimes not everything can make the jump from the big screen to the small screen and vice versa. I mean, for evidence, another Stephen King movie, another Stephen King story that has often had trouble making the jump from page to screen is is It. The original 1990 TV miniseries was the first half handled quite well, but much like the current remake that was in theaters, didn't do so well when you got to the adults half of the story. Though that story in and of itself has its own issues. But I'm not going to get into that
Wait,
here.
by it do you mean Pennywise?
Yep, that's the title of the movie, and the book is It.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely go with the classic on this one. The last Pennywise that came out felt more Jokery. Like close to the Joker from Batman in a way. Like what if the Joker from Batman was some kind of spooky entity? Which he still could be actually, depending on which origin with DC Comics decide to go with it with when it comes to the origins of the Joker.
Exactly. I still kind of prefer Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise.
Well, that's absolutely actually fair. However, also from book to screen, that I feel could have been a bit better, I would say, is Goosebumps.
Oh, we're getting into the shows. We're jumping.
No, I'm talking about the movie where it was with Jack Black.
Oh,
It came a while ago.
oh yeah, the movie. I almost forgot.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there was a movie and there were two shows. I believe the second show was more of a remake for the older version show of the Goosebumps, I would go with the books more than I would go with the movie. With all due respect to Mr. Jack Black, I love his acting. I love. Have you seen his social media?
No, I
This
haven't.
dude was this dude was amazing on TikTok during COVID.
I can believe it.
Trust me, the most hilarious TikToks I can go through. I would recommend everyone to actually go and check out his TikToks. They're brilliant. Dude's talented as heck. But when it comes to the Goosebumps, I feel they probably didn't do him very well. He did amazing in Jumanji, and we'll see what happens in Minecraft. But Goosebumps, again, it was very iconic. Is a very iconic name, especially for oldies like us,
Yeah,
basically.
90s
From the
kids.
1900s. From the 1900s.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to being a 90s
Yeah,
kid. We're millennials. Yes, we're tagging ourselves as millennials.
Hey, you're 90s. I'm more of an 80s. I'm late 80s.
That doesn't absolve
Believe
you
it or
from
not.
being a millennial.
Oh, definitely. I am still within that category. However, now when it comes to shows that would spook you out, my favorite would go to Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, that's a good one.
It is beautiful, I would have to admit. It basically inspired my childhood to a certain point. I mean, it had a very good impact on my childhood. Um, I tried to redo it with my friends. My limited amount of friends, sadly.
Hey, don't be so
but
hard on yourself.
but when it comes to that one, it does have a nice impact, especially when you see it as a bunch of teenagers around a campfire telling scary stories.
You know where some of the inspiration for that show came from? The
Oh,
Twilight
please
Zone.
do tell me.
Uh, Twilight Zone was a classic 1960s, 1970s black and white anthology show. It was mostly science fiction, but it had some horror elements to it on occasion. It wasn't the main focus was to scare. It was mostly, like I said, to make you think, to change your perspective on something. But there were quite a few fair episodes in there that were quite scary because of the subject matter and how they portrayed things. I watched that with my father when I was growing up, and it has a very special place in my heart. But you can kind of see the inspiration that drove the creators of Are You Afraid of the Dark to with Twilight Zone, because once again it's a horror anthology, and unlike just having one person to tell the story, which was always Rod Serling at the beginning and the end of the episode, with Twilight Zone, you had the Midnight Society, the group of children who would gather around every night and tell stories by the campfire, each one taking a different turn each week.
Well, also now we can actually go to the newer now shows. You've got also the remake of Goosebumps right now when you think about it. But I would recommend actually seeing the classics. However, if we are gonna talk new, you can actually jump on Netflix that would give you um some shows that are very interesting. Going from Black Mirror to Love, Death, and Robots. I believe that's what it's called. Love, Death, and Robots. These kind of give you see almost nothing in common between each episode because each episode tells you a story that is told in a different way, whether it's 3D, 2D, live action, or even a mixture of both, going from robots that are having a tour of the world, a post-apocalypse, to things that are supernatural that you will have to go through as well, or actually creatures that you would meet, which is definitely interesting twists every once in a while. One of them that definitely scared me, I would say, is the Santa Claus take on things in that show. It that definitely had quite an impact. Um, a small spoiler here for that one episode. Um, Santa Claus was no human. It looked like an alien creature similar to the lickers from Resident Evil, with what looked like hands playing a peekaboo with you around its mouth. I would hate to see how this thing would act if it basically labels you as a naughty kid on the naughty list. Thankfully, the kids that were in that episode were on the good list. Um, and they received their presents. However, there was no bag or giant gift sack. It was simply something from within its own body for some grotesque, disgusting way of receiving a gift. The gift would actually come out of its mouth, and it would then pat the kids on the head before it goes and tell them to be good. I would have been scarred if I was in the place of those kids, but surprisingly, they were okay with it as long as they got what they wanted. Yeah, but that definitely would have been a motivation to stay on the good side, I guess.
And that's kids for you.
But I believe there was another series, sorry, uh, that focuses on sci-fi, and I believe it's called the Black Mirror.
Ah, yes, Black Mirror. That's a good one. And it's also much in the same vein as Twilight Zone. It's more of like a modern version of the Twilight Zone, if we're honest.
So maybe you could just tell us a few things probably about Black Mirror, if you've seen any of their episodes,
I've
any
seen a
that
few
stuck with
or
you.
watched a couple of reviews about it. Uh, one of the ones that I find quite horrific is the one about AI, where they're literally taking a snapshot of someone's brain and trapping it in a house. Or like in another
Oh,
dimension almost. It's quite freaky if you think about it. There were other ones
definitely a
about
take.
the social currency and how that would work feasibly. It got kind of a little scary, to say the least.
Yeah, I wouldn't really blame you to actually be scared of those things. Yeah, those have very disturbing kind of things to them. When it comes to also series that I would say kind of have a bit of bordering on the spooky. There's one not as spooky, but I believe it's a bit of a take on the headless horseman. I think it's called Hollow.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Basically, I did see a few episodes. Actually, I finished it to be quite honest. It basically goes around the story of a person who has met the headless horseman. Later on, is connected by magic or something to said horseman, and he actually wakes up in the supposed modern times. Oh yeah,
Fascinating,
it's
almost
called
like Rip Van Winkle.
Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, Sleepy Hollow, yeah.
Sleepy Hollow. Yeah. It was, I think, out in 2013. It definitely had a nice aspect to it. And if you're gonna go with another one, with two more, I believe, that have the same feel to them, I would go with Grimm and the famous Supernatural.
Oh, that's a good one. Don't go too far though. Some of the later seasons do get a little funny.
Well, of course, if a series goes for too long, they tend to kind of lose track of their original flavor sometimes.
Yeah, it does happen. Though, I was going to recommend something to watch, especially on Netflix, I would go for The Haunting of Hill House. It's a story about a house that is haunted or tainted by some mysterious entity, and the effects it has on the family that stayed there, even if for a short time, but it still follows them through life. And there's also the companion series to it, which is Haunting of Bly Manor. Haunting of Bly Manor takes place in a different location. It takes place in England, and both series are based off of a collection of different books. Primarily for The Haunting of Hill House, it is based off of the original novel Hill House from the 1950s. It was written by an interesting author. I forgot her name, but the book is quite a fun read. I have it on Audible, and I enjoy listening to it. The Haunting of Hill House definitely deviates from the book, but it has its own charm to it, and I actually quite like it. In contrast to the book, sometimes when it comes to horror movies versus horror books, it's a definite change to see the differences, but sometimes those differences make one or other a better entity on its own. And Bly Manor is also based off of a couple of different either horror short stories or horror novels, like The Turning of the Screw, stuff like that. But I believe that gets us out of our TV and streaming and into our next little section, which is online horror. Think things along the lines
Yes.
of the SCP Foundation, creepypasta, and other internet sensations that have their own spooky flair to them.
You have a scary pasta?
That's just the name of That's just the name of the actual thing. It's not actually scary pasta, you know.
Oh, okay. That because if there was an actual scary pasta, I might maybe stay away from Italy for a while. But I'm guessing, jokes aside, scary pastas are basically a bunch of stories that you kind of read online that tend to be rather scary in their own way. I believe you have a better description to what they are, Lunar.
So creepypasta at its base is a portmanteau of copypasta. Copypasta got its start on 4chan, which was basically copying pasting the same kind of little thread around word for word. A creepypasta is an internet horror story that is copy and pasted and spread around the internet that way. A lot of the best, in my opinion, creepypastas were written in a fashion that it sounded like the OP had actually experienced what was going on. So it was meant to sound real, as compared to more classic horror stories, where it was either a third person, sometimes told from first person, but it was clear that this was fantastical and not the author's. It was easier to show that this was fiction. Whereas since these were shared on old school message boards like 4chan and Something Awful and a few other places, it was meant to come off as more realistic. Though it really depended.
Yeah, and some of those stories tend to kind of come to life with their readers in forms of creatures that tend to get very famous, such as the Slender Man. I
Yes,
believe
Slenderman.
there have been a lot of creepypastas around the Slender Man or certain urban legends and of the sorts. A lot of the readers, I mean, you can actually find a good chunk of readers for the creepypastas on YouTube. God only knows how many are recommended to me on my YouTube because I've been listening to a lot of them.
Yeah, some readers I find are better than others, but one of my favorite creepypastas is uh, Abandoned by Disney. It's a very
Oh yeah,
old
Disney
school
definitely
classic.
had a lot of stories around them.
It's a very classic older creepypasta. It wasn't perfectly written, and the creator himself, Slimebeast, will often say he was doing it in some of the style and the writing was purposeful, but if he were to go back, he probably would change some parts in the editing. But it's quite an interesting little tale, borrowing from some real life things. that give the story credence. So that's part of the realism play, but it's still quite a fascinating story. I'm not gonna
Well,
spoil
I'm
it. You're
actually
gonna have to look it up
surprised.
for yourself.
Well, I'm actually so surprised that Disney didn't go after him for any kind of licensing or any kind of copyrights in regarding to their name or their mention in his stories. However, I do know one thing that you won't be actually chased around for their copyright and licensing. It would be SCP.
Yes, good old SCP.
Yeah, SCP is currently in the public domain, and by that, that means you can actually use their, you know, their things basically for free, without any kind of issues. As far as I've known, I'm not 100% about it. You can't go look that up. For any legal issues, do not go to me.
Fair.
But they definitely have interesting takes on different things. Some of my favorite SCPs are like very famous ones, if I'm going to be honest. And if you're wondering what SCP actually stands for, SCP stands for Secure, um, Contain,
Contain.
Protect.
Yeah.
And they definitely contain a lot of things. They go from SCP-682, I believe, which is the indestructible lizard. Basically, it's a lizard that hates life, and it's unkillable. Every measure of an attempt to kill said lizard has failed. It is too aggressive to every single life form, except for one, surprisingly, which is SCP-053. SCP-053 is basically an SCP of a small girl that is, well, I would recommend going to look at her story, but she seems to be friendly with 682, and he seems to be rather protective of her to a certain point. And if we're talking about SCPs that are tending to be very smart, 049, the Plague Doctor, is definitely something to be wary of. He is smart, he is incredibly persuasive if you're not careful enough.
Interesting.
And if you want, yeah, and trust me, another persuasive, very sadly persuasive SCP, it's going to be SCP 035, which is the Mask. Uh, 035 is definitely something, an SCP that tends to play on the mind. It tricks you into believing that it's something nice, and then just takes you over. It's a mask that tends to take over its host, while also corroding said host with a liquid that emanates from it or its surroundings. That's why sometimes the SCP has a bit of a hard time containing it, and they keep offering it, a D-class personnel to possess, and it can actually possess even inanimate objects like mannequins, but it prefers humans because it can also read their minds when it possesses them, which is entertainment for SCP, 035.
Interesting.
Have you any like SCPs that kind of let's say scare you a bit, or
Well,
did you not look into?
I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head.
You can try and give a description. It's okay. Their
Uh,
numbers are many.
let's see. I think it was. It takes the form of an It's an anthropod that will often disguise itself as a different type of like bus or car in order to lure victims in order to eat them alive and use them as the next lure for a victim. I
Oh, okay.
believe it's SCP 19. I'm not sure if I got the number right, but I think it's either 1980 ironically, 1985, which often takes the form of a Volkswagen Bug.
Well, that's actually ironic in its own way. For me, if I'm going to be going with two of my scariest, I would go with 096, which is the Crying Man. The Crying Man would hunt you down anywhere you go. He doesn't even need to see you, as long as you've seen his face, even in a drawing, whether in a drawing or even in a single pixel of a picture. He would sense that no matter where he is, and he wouldn't trust, and it is nearly impossible to stop until he has killed the person who has seen his image, basically, or his face. But if I'm going to go with the scariest, I'm gonna go with SCP, the Build-A-Bear. The Build-A-Bear is, in my opinion at least, is the most disturbing one, because the Build-A-Bear would be acting nice with people, like it could walk up to you with a very adorable drawing or something like that. However, if you are not wary, it can, as its name is, build an actual bear, something like the Build-A-Bear shop. However, the ingredients or the materials it would use are something that is very horrific. They would have actually different abilities and powers as well. Like one time it built a whole bear out of ears. The SCP tried to find the origin of said ears, but they were unsuccessful in many occasions. But if I'm going to talk about an incident that the Build-A-Bear creeped me out, is the time the Build-A-Bear actually built a bear using an unborn child. It basically attacked a staff member and using the unborn child built a bear, which that definitely gives me nightmares.
Yeah, I can see why that would give you nightmares. But I think I would add
Yeah.
in another one that actually scares me quite a lot is SCP 610, the Flesh That Hates. It's a fleshy entity that overtook an entire town in Russia. And dear lord, it is definitely not something I would want to run across myself.
Oh yeah, definitely when looking up the Flesh That Hates, especially in the SCP Foundation wiki, the pictures are beyond disturbing. Even looking at them right now, let's just say my stomach isn't as agreeable. Oh boy, as it is usually.
Well, that kind of thing isn't something that you deal with unless you have the stomach for it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, no one deals with the spooks, unless they get the stomach for it, I guess. And if we're gonna talk about dealing with things, the online rituals. The spooky online rituals that
Ah,
you can
yes.
find alongside the creepypastas online, they vary, and only the ones I believe that are, well, stupid to actually dare to do them. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone doing them. Just a quick disclaimer here. Please, I am begging you. Just because you heard about them here and possibly look them up after we have spoken about them, do not do them. I don't know if they're real, I don't know if they are not real, but still, please do avoid them.
Yeah,
I
just
believe you already know one
yes, I do.
said ritual. Oh,
One.
please illuminate.
It's one by the name of the Devil Game, and now it's written in the form of a creepypasta, but it details how to talk and get answers from the devil himself.
And please be sure to keep in mind that dealing with the devil isn't exactly the smartest thing to do, so please, I beg of you, try and stay away from it. So if you could tell us about the ritual, possibly?
So what it details out in the actual the actual laid out ritual, which is in the form of kind of a copy, like I said, creepypasta. It starts out with you finding a small church to go to in the middle of the night. It doesn't have to be on any particular day as long as it's important to you. So it can be on a full moon, a new moon, Friday the 13th, Halloween. It's more about the psychological effect that the day should have on you. So it has to be like extra spooky. And then from there, timing is important. When you start or end the ritual, it should be 12 in the morning exactly at Greenwich. It doesn't have to start or end at, correction, it doesn't have to start or end at like 12 a.m. exactly. It would be more a general rule of thumb to show that you're there a bit before midnight to set everything up. And then maybe take just only a little bit of time after. It doesn't have to go super long, but this sort of thing gets shockingly quick. But you do need to make sure that you can get into the church that you're intending on doing this ritual inside of. But the things you are going to need are a full can of salt. You won't need all of it, but it's always better to have a bunch than not enough. 7 candles, red or white, a white being preferable. Something to light the candles with, of course. You can't summon the devil without candles burning. You cannot believe how many people would forget to take a lighter with them. A string of red rope, yarn, or thread, and a full-length or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of these already present in the church that you're breaking into in the middle of the night. From there, what you're going to do is bring something like markers, pencils, writing tools, along with a flashlight so you don't trip around in the dark, you know. One thing that it cautions against is bringing any form of electronic timekeeping or normal analog timekeeping devices. This includes cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, so on and so forth. If you're one of those people who has to have your smartphone on you at all times, you don't have to worry. You can still bring them to the church, but you have to leave them outside the room. It will break things if you bring it in. Also, you're not supposed to bring any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it's from the Abrahamic religions. Think crosses, things like that. And if you do, the devil will simply refuse to show up. So, the reason why you're doing the salt and the rope is because it is protective on its own, so you don't need extra protection. But you can always go with some of the other folk tales out there to help if you feel like you need an extra bit of protection. From there, you'll set up the supplies. You'll pull a circle of salt around the mirror and make sure that it has sufficient enough floor space to make that circle. Now, if the mirror is mounted on the wall, it'll be a semicircle. Whereas if it's a full standing mirror, then it'll be a full circle. Now, you could sneak into a church carrying a mirror with you, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's quite an unwieldy thing to be carrying around a full-length floor mirror. Now, when you do this, after you get the salt put down, you'll start to wrap the string around the mirror several times. And remember that the string being red is important, as it's a symbol of protection. This is why red was chosen. Now, after you get that done with the circle of salt and with the twine or whatever you decide to use, you'll put the candles around the outside of your circle of salt, keeping them spaced at pretty even intervals. And you don't necessarily have to be exact with it, but once you get them done and set out, you light them in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to break the circle of salt, because then you'll have to start all over again. Once you have everything burning strongly, then you can now summon the devil. what it recommends is finding some kind of small bit of sacrilegious act in the sacred space to summon him sufficiently, like, say, turning a cross upside down or graffitiing something important. But it really depends on how far you're willing to go in order to not get yourself into trouble when someone finds what you've been doing the next morning. So, after you've done that, you'll close your eyes, and before that, you'll stare deeply into the mirror, concentrating on your desired outcome. You don't need any incantations or strings of Latin to recite. It's just you stare as hard as you can, thinking of exactly what you want to happen, which is you want the devil to show up in the mirror. And then after you've done this for a solid few moments, then you'll close your eyes and then open them. If you've done it correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection and you will be looking at the devil. Or at least the way that he's chosen to show up to you. Don't be surprised if he doesn't look like the classic goat horns and pitchfork that everybody thinks about.
That will be definitely something to actually look forward to.
He usually takes the form, or at least so they say, he takes the form of a nondescript human being, but a very handsome one regardless. He has a bit of vanity, of course.
And that's just like Strahd in a way.
Well, he didn't get his name the devil for nothing, you know. Anyway.
So tell me, what would be the purpose of the ritual actually? Why would someone actually dare and go through all this to basically speak to the devil?
Well, the point of it is because he knows things. Being the being he is, he knows things that you may not. Though getting a honest answer out of him might be hard, but that's where the game takes place. You have him agree to doing a game of question and response, and you guys will go back and forth, and hopefully, if all goes well, you'll get a truthful answer out of him. Now, you have to be very, very careful the way you say things. And if your question is a riddle that's been written down anywhere, he will instantly know it. So think things like the riddle game from The Hobbit. Do not use that. You are going to have to want to come up with something on the fly, but it has to make sense.
So for the distance that people actually go to for answers to their questions and finding information that they possibly wouldn't actually get otherwise, there is also another ritual, believe it or not, that also has a price. However, that price is, unlike the devil's, unknown, and that is the Answer Man.
Well, to be fine enough pointing on it with the devil game before we switch, the one thing that you are cautioned against repeatedly is giving the devil your name. The minute you give him your name, he will swap places with you, but that could still happen if you fail at this little game. It's a lot more than just your soul on the line.
So what's one of the things that the devil might do as as maybe a price for your failure in that game?
Well, if you don't succeed, either he will borrow your body for a little while, putting your soul in the mirror, or sometimes even if you are successful, he might ask a favor from you in exchange for the information. Sometimes
And
it's
do you
not
think it's
nearly
smart
as
to actually
bad.
give the devil a favor?
It depends. Sometimes he won't ask anything big of you, or at least so the ritual states, that he won't always ask something big like a mass shooting or something. It might just be something small, something innocuous that you don't realize might have sinister actions down the road.
Like maybe spreading the ritual steps online?
Perhaps, yeah. The OP probably should have been more careful.
I mean, if OP.
If. True. But, as you were saying about the answer...
Yes. the answer man is another way of actually getting yourself into trouble to actually get an answer for a question that you would like. This game originated in Japan. It is usually 10 players that play this game, gathering in a circle with your cell phones. And this is surprisingly one of those rituals that actually uses electronic devices, while most rituals would advise not having said devices on you or even anywhere close to you. Basically, most rituals would tell you keep it at the door. So you would gather around in a circle talking. Basically, the thing that you will try and do is you would call the person to your left at the same time. All 10 of you should do this at the same time, as all of you, well, not all of you, most of you would actually receive the busy signal. One will not. This person would actually hear a voice at the end of the line that will answer, and just then you would know that you have actually reached the answer man. Talking to said thing, um, you would ask them a question. You are allowed to ask the question. Um, However, do keep in mind, just like everything else, nothing is for free, including the answer man's answers. So the information that the answer man would provide you regarding that question should come at a price. However, that price will be determined by the type of information that you have wanted to acquire from the answer man. The question is, how far will you be actually willing to go for said answers?
I mean, if you're desperate enough, anybody will.
Well, desperation surely makes people do something. And I believe some people are even desperate for fun, don't you think?
Yeah, true. I mean,
Even,
what's the point with the devil game if you aren't going to get a little bit of a thrill rush from talking to him?
yeah, and sometimes you don't have your friends around. You can, you might have stuffed toys maybe around, and you can actually play hide and go seek alone. That's actually one of the rituals that you can actually do with dolls.
Interesting.
I'm not sh- I'm not sure why people would actually go that far for different things, whether it's to play on their own or even attempt to reach a different dimension in rituals similar to the elevator game. It honestly goes beyond my head on how far people would go to reach the supernatural, and then they're wondering like, what did I do with my life? You made like a big wrong decision right here. What do you think? You got one person dealing with the devil, another person going for an answer on the phone, or others playing solo with something that would possibly kill them, or one that is just curious what's beyond the veil.
I mean, some people always do look for something like that. I can't say I fully understand it, but, sometimes when you're desperate for either something fun to do or to get an answer to something that's important to you, you'll do whatever it takes.
Would you ever go and deal with such rituals?
Me? Nah, that's not my style.
Yeah, I guess you're gonna possibly stick to the crystal balls. I mean, that's the only way, I guess, to contact me when I'm far away.
That or, summoning rituals. Or plane hopping.
Oh, sweet lord, plane hopping. I'm guessing that's the one time I actually lost contact of you.
Yeah, I was in another plane of existence. I was hanging out with one of my buddies in the elemental plane of fire. He loves
Oh,
to put
sweet
on a
lord.
show.
Well, I'm guessing their shows definitely go up in a blaze of glory every once in a while.
Oh, totally. I mean, they're 3D. They
Oh,
certainly love to
sweet
show
lord.
off.
So, do you have any additional rituals you would like to maybe tell us about?
Not that I remember particularly. I do know about some of the ones that you've just mentioned. There is the Three Kings, but I'm not as well versed on it as you are.
The Three Kings, I'm not exactly that well versed in it. However, the Three Kings tend to be a ritual that I still don't fully understand the meaning behind doing it. But the Three Kings is a way of actually playing with entities from a shadow side, basically. As the description of it mentions, the object of this game is to summon spirits from the shadow side. Before playing, a player sets up 3 chairs. He sits in one and then places mirrors in front. Um, uh, uh,
I'm
sorry,
seeing a
places
theme with
mirrors
mirrors
in the
here.
other two. Yeah, when it comes to contacting, I guess, otherworldly creatures, mirrors tend to be something in common. Reflections might be something in a different world that we do not say. I
So
mean,
I've
I
heard.
guess a movie, I believe, took some kind of interest in that once, if I'm not wrong. Um, so in this one, you place the mirrors in the other 2 chairs. From the player's perspective, the player is the king, while the entities that will appear in the mirrors are the queen and the fool. However, from the entities' perspectives, each one of them is king. Thus the name, Three Kings. In addition to the mirrors, the player also needs candles. Candles, a fan, a bucket of water, and other items. The lists, there's like a list of instructions on how you should actually follow them. But also, there's something that is to keep in mind. This is one of those games that you would actually need a person with you. However, that person will not be in the ritual room or anywhere near it. They could be in the same house as you are. And the purpose of their presence is simply to play something of a safety measure. Aside from the different safeties that you have placed around you, sometimes you would accidentally go longer than you would need to. And in rituals, whether it's the devil game, the hide and go seek, or any of those, going for a long time with said entities puts you in more danger. Every minute, every second that you spend with them is something that isn't really recommended to do. So keep in mind, if you are going to be doing any of the rituals that we have actually mentioned, please, please do not do them and stay far and far away from them as possible. But if you are going to do them, even though we absolutely are against it, make sure
Yeah,
to
don't do
stick
anything
to the
stupid,
safety.
please. This isn't a hey
Yes.
how-to guide. This is us just talking. Even though
We are
these
just
sound like
simply
fun,
mentioning them in the spooky time.
yeah, even though these sound like
Yeah.
fun, I wouldn't recommend deliberately trying to talk to the devil himself or any of these strange, weird entities that are involved. Unless you really know what you're doing, which I doubt most of you do.
Yep. So, with that, I believe we have reached, I guess, a good time.
Yeah.
An
Um,
hour.
this is where we'll sign off. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you again next time for our continuation, mind you. Sorry. Of this little podcast for Spooktober Part 2 with horror movies, well, no, horror novels or books, and folklore and classic monsters of horror. Once again,
And
this
the
has
urban
been,
legends as well.
oh yeah, urban legends, which are quite the fun to delve into and research. Well, once again, this has been Curse of Geek with DM Lunar and Tamashi Saka, and we're looking forward to seeing you all next time. Take care, guys.
See ya.